Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you are listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom, as we welcome today The Lost Voice, with John Studi and Jacob Nelson.
Welcome to the Lost Voice radio program, where we seek to uncover the lost voice of wisdom which spoke to Socrates some several thousand years ago. I am here. This is John Studi. And my friend Jacob Nelson, sitting across the desk from me.
Yes.
How are you, Jacob?
I am doing quite well. Been on, an exciting week. I was walking across my kitchen floor, and squish went one of the tiles. Turns out the dishwasher decided to leak everywhere. So off I went to the store to buy a new dishwasher, and then install it.
And how'd that go?
Well, smoothly.
How much did it cost?
Enough.
Yuck.
Well, to get something decent, you got to spend a little bit of money. But
I know.
We didn't buy the bottom tier, but we bought, the next level up. It's nice. It's quiet.
It's usually what I do. I think it's prudent.
Actually, we got one of the lower end ones, and I installed it, and it was loud enough where, pretty sure it woke up Matthias in the other room. And he's kind of a light sleeper anyway, but decided to bring that back. Also, the frame of it was dented, even though it was new. So,
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's horrible.
So, it happens. So.
Well, Molly and I want a new dishwasher, too, because this one up here, it's wastes a ton of water, for one.
Yeah.
It takes like 2.5 hours to get anything done. It drives me nuts.
Well, actually, all the newer dishwashers take just as long, if not longer.
Why?
Because I was just reading in my owner's manual, they use lower energy motors to conserve energy, but then it takes a little bit longer.
Low energy, huh? Lazy.
Yeah, I know.
Lazy machines.
Give it some caffeine. Just pour a Monster in it with the water.
I have been a fan of these little 5-hour energy shots. And the Aldi brand is fantastic because it's only 89 cents, whereas the other stuff is like $5. But, oh my gosh, totally worth it when you have 3 kids who all have sleeping problems. Oh, but I'm good. I took a nap today. It was fantastic. Have you ever taken a nap, Jake?
It's been a long time since I've even slept.
No, you poor man. I would love to do some research on sleep.
Like hands-on research?
Hands-on research.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been thinking about joining a lay order, the brothers of St. Joseph.
Okay.
You know where I'm going with this?
I think so.
Because what they do is they sleep 24/7 because Joseph encountered God in the dream, or encountered the angels in the dream,
right?
Which converted his heart to accept Mary, and then thus he was able to take care of the Holy Family.
Mm-hmm.
And protect Mary and Christ, and take care of his wife and his child. And that's exactly what I want to do as a father, is take care of my wife and child. And the best way to do that is for me to fall asleep and wait for an angel to come and tell me what I need to do as a father.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a plan.
I think the only real way to tell if it's a good plan or a bad one is to just execute it.
The religious order. As in,
good. Here we go. Another one.
They
brace yourself, folks.
No, I mean it's the same. It's the same order of St. Joseph. They actually their monastery is on a cruise ship.
Is that right?
It is.
And what's the name of this cruise ship?
The cruise ship, of course, it's called the Bark of Peter.
Because
Joseph is the guardian of the church.
Right.
And the church is the ark of the ark of the new covenant, insofar as all those who are saved through the waters of baptism from the death of sin are saved because they reside in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unlike all the sin that's washed away, all the people who are redeemed by baptism or through baptism remain with God and they have great cabins. Not a whole lot of activity, but the whole purpose of it is that the waves of the ocean gently rock all the brothers to sleep.
What is wrong with you?
I know Paul Hedman. That's what's wrong with me.
Hey, speaking of Paul Hedman and stupid stories, we have to have you tell a story on air regarding
What?
the train conductor.
Oh my gosh.
Or
the three brothers and
the
their
three
adventure.
brothers,
The
yes.
adventure. When are we going to do this? This is just going to be a one straight show.
I just had an idea.
What?
Multi-part episode.
Oh my gosh, Jake.
String it out a little bit.
We can tie in some, good theological
Yeah.
insights. We should do this.
Which story do you want to start with?
Considering recent issues regarding bioethics
Uh-huh.
and what we can do with capital punishment,
Uh-huh.
I think that the train conductor story would probably be the most
Yeah.
fitting example.
Okay.
All right. We can do a 2-part episode.
2 parts?
Perhaps 4-part episode.
I don't know if 2 parts is going to do it justice. We only have an hour per episode.
Well, I mean, I suppose, the lead up to... Yeah. No, we can probably do 4 episodes. We can do this.
When do you want to start this story?
We should do something on Catholic bioethics, and maybe we can pull on Dr. Elizabeth Rex to have her talk about the death penalty and other things.
Well, she'd have to call in. I don't know if we could really pull on her. We'd talk to her.
Maybe we could.
Yeah.
If we went to Connecticut, we could probably pull on her. She actually moved to closer to Holy Apostles now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she used to live out, a couple miles.
Very good.
But it's nice to be able to drive into work.
Yes. Can you believe we're not even to 7 minutes of obligatory nonsense? This is ridiculous.
Time flies.
I thought it was going to be a lot more. Time's going slow.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it for today's episode. No. Today we're going to talk about. I really like talking about current events, and we talked a little bit about that last week. And I know you like doing a little bit more theoretical philosophy and that kind of thing. And I think we, just in part why we're good friends is that you give great insight into some of these things, and I keep you grounded in reality and keeping up with day-to-day kind of things. And we're good buddies. Works out well.
It does, and part of the reason why, excuse me, part of the reason why I sometimes miss out on these current events is because I don't have time to read the news.
Yeah.
I don't even know who's president. Who's president?
You know.
I know.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Unbelievable. I still can't believe this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I can't say I'm not necessarily upset, but it's just weird.
It is weird.
I never would have thought that. The only
President Trump.
The only thing I knew about President Trump when I was younger, my youth minister, I was like 15 or 16 years old, he had mentioned Donald Trump as an example of somebody who, what was he saying? Somebody who gets back up again, and is also an example of a person who has become wealthy although they aren't righteous. Because, of course, the church I grew up in taught that if you were righteous and lived
That's
faithfully
right.
and...
That's right. You were in a health and wealth gospel church.
Yeah, see how that turned out for me.
You became Catholic.
I became Catholic. And I've only been sick once. That's not true. I had food poisoning twice. It was horrible. Actually, 3 times now I think about it since I became Catholic. Once was from when I was at St. Charles, the parish you're working at now. We had had cheesecake for RCIA, and for whatever reason, me and my brother both got horrible food poisoning.
You know what's funny about that?
What?
Is there has not been a time that I've had cheesecake and not gotten extremely ill.
Really?
I hate cheesecake.
Well, I love
I've gotten
cheesecake,
sick
that's the thing.
every time I've eaten it.
That's like every time I eat White Castle. I cannot. Yeah, I can't even stand the smell of
Well,
White Castle.
I
It
think
makes me
that's
sick.
probably true for every person ever
That's true.
made.
That's true.
Yeah.
Although, interesting note, my mom used to be able to eat White Castle, but after she got pregnant with me, actually during her pregnancy, she would throw up.
Huh.
whenever she would have White Castle.
Oh, how about that?
And coincidentally, since then, I've also thrown up.
You know, it's interesting. Even people that hate White Castle swear that if you make stuffing out of White Castle,
What?
it's actually really good.
No, like the buns or the
whole thing, you
burger?
just chop it all up and make like stuffing. I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, I'd be willing to give it a shot simply because I like to experiment. But
We should do a cooking with the Lost Voice.
we should, and then we can do Stoodles noodles.
Stu.
I haven't made Stoodles noodles in forever.
Yeah.
I love Stoodles noodles.
Anyway, the current event that I want to talk about today ties in with the fact, you know, that as Christians, as Catholics, as, you know, wherever we are in our faith journey as adults, really we are called to be leaders. And leadership is a really important thing to lost art, really, in a lot of our day today. But one of the topics I want to talk about today, and then start tying in with some of the tenets of Christianity and Catholicism, is this firing of Andrew McCabe, who is the deputy director of the FBI. And it's just interesting because if we look at the idea of leadership within this context and how Andrew McCabe failed to lead, James Comey, the director of the FBI, failed to lead, Donald Trump and some of his failures, Jeff Sessions and some of his failures, and you just go down the line, and then of course Andrew McCabe is fired, and fired not for a political reason, but from an internal investigation from the FBI itself. And the media is making it out to be as if it was a political firing, and of course, and demonizing Trump for this and Jeff Sessions, when Andrew McCabe actually did some very fireable offenses. Such as he lied to investigators. So that usually incurs a jail sentence.
Rightfully so, and thankfully so.
And he also leaked investigative information from an ongoing investigation to the Wall Street Journal. And he claims that as deputy director, he had the authority to do so. One of the problems with this is that rewind about a year, and Director Comey, before Congress, said that he had never authorized anybody to release any information to the press. And in McCabe's testimony, it actually indicts James Comey, and so you actually have both of them lying to investigators.
That's unbelievable. How do you think he can get away with lying to the FBI?
Well, if you're the head of the FBI...
I suppose. I mean, I guess you got that there. You have the...
Yeah.
What do you call it? You have all the political power and the prestige and, you know, the procedures and the things that you train people for.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, man. 2 in a row. How do we handle this, Jake? What should we do? What does a good and effective leader do in a situation where somebody in such a vital position of power and influence acts in such a way that is contrary to the vows that they take?
Well, that's tough because I have zero power and even less influence. So, you know.
You have negative influence.
I do. Exactly.
I'm sure that works. It doesn't make any sense. You
Well,
don't exist.
Studi, you should know because you have a very negative influence on me. I'm kidding.
Hey,
You have a very positive influence
Jake.
on me. But this, you know, of course, this is a crisis of leadership. It's a crisis of integrity. On the part of political operatives, we might say Donald Trump, James Comey, because Donald Trump, you know, part of the failure here is not clearly and concisely stating why Andrew McCabe is fired, which allows then the media and those opposed to Trump to run wild with making it out to be as if it's some political firing to end the investigation, Russian meddling and that kind of stuff, Russian collusion. So Trump doesn't get out ahead of this.
Sure.
Jeff Sessions doesn't really get out ahead of it. Well, I mean, he does say exactly why Andrew McCabe was fired. But from what I've seen there's very little pushback against the media and the narrative that the Democrats are pushing, that Donald Trump is a bully. You know, he's just mean-spirited for no reason because he fired Andrew McCabe 2 days before he was eligible to receive his pension.
And on his birthday, after he had a bad day when he stubbed his toe.
Well, it was 2 days before his 50th birthday. But the thing is, you know, Andrew McCabe...
What, he's Philly?
Yeah, he was fired 2 days before his 50th birthday, which is when he would be eligible to receive his pension of roughly $1.8 million.
$1.8 million?
Yeah.
I mean,
that pales in comparison to the pension of a church employee.
Yes.
But
Did we get a pension? Do we get a pension?
well, you can sign up for the Archdiocese.
No, you can't.
Well, it's a retirement. It's a 403B. It's not a pension.
You're never going to retire. It's just like a carrot attached to a stick that's attached to your forehead. You keep running after it. Keeps on going faster.
Yeah, so...
I'm grateful for my employment in the church.
I am too. Yes.
Most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. And those other times we have other jobs to supplement, like this wonderful radio show, which isn't actually a job; it's something we volunteer to do, and it's fun.
But I prioritize it above almost everything else that I do.
What was I going to say now? Snooty threw me off.
Well, friends jiu-jitsu and karate and judo, so I decided that we should start right here.
Perfect. So you're going to throw me off the building?
No, sure. I mean, we can do that. I mean, we can go up on my roof. It's been a while.
Oh.
Before we do that, before I actually throw you off, though, can you help me, like, clear off some of the ice dams that might be built up there?
Yeah, why not?
Get rid of some sticks. I gotta take down a tree. Mike offered to do it for me. It was really nice.
That's
Next
good.
brother-in-law. But I missed out on the date. You know, there's only, like, specific times you can take down trees throughout the year? Certain trees. What? This is content.
I'm amazed.
Golden content.
I'm amazed at how easily this program veers off of any kind of track.
Welcome to the mind of somebody with ADHD. The fact they can ever string together a coherent sentence should amaze you. It's absolutely astounding, the words and the thoughts that go through my head. Kind of like how, even though I've been really sick today, I'm dying for a Shamrock Shake as you sit there eating your McDonald's in front of me.
Drinking a Coke.
Drinking a Coke,
Yeah.
Alright, same thing. Drinking is eating.
Drinking is eating.
The kids are convinced that's the case.
Well, you know, this whole thing with Andrew McCabe keeps going because in order for him to receive his $1.8 million pension, he needs 2 more days of federal service. And so now there's Democrats saying, I'll hire you for 2 days so you can get your pension. Well, this is a huge issue of failure of leadership on the Democrat part, too, because if Andrew McCabe is fired because he actually did illegal things,
Right.
when he is the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, there should be no amnesty, so to speak, in order to get him $1.8 million of taxpayer money when he sullied the reputation of the FBI, lied to investigators. I mean, people should be in an uproar about this. Not just that, you know, the FBI at the top is corrupt.
It's kind of corrupt, and at this level too. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not just like they're taking a few pennies off the top of the budget or something like that.
They're
This
lying
is
to
like
investigators.
about presidential elections, and
Right.
all sorts of other things.
Right. So not only should we be upset about that, but the fact that our elected representatives are trying to cheat the system to give this man more of our money. I mean, this is ridiculous. And yet people applaud it because why? It's considered an anti-Trump thing. And we can't live in a society that's constantly anti-something.
Right.
When we consistently and constantly proclaim a position of against, we can never actually build something. And actually Pope Benedict talks about this in one of his speeches on conscience back in, I think that was the early 80s. He gave a couple speeches on conscience in D.C. Great book that people compiled of these two speeches, and he talks about having the spirit of antagonism, or the spirit of being against things. And when we're constantly against things, everything just falls apart because there's nothing there to bind it together. Mm-hmm. And that's what actually the Democrats are in a lot of trouble for coming up in the next round of elections, is that if their whole platform is to be anti-Trump, they're going to fail. And I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. And I certainly don't like the two-party system, but what I like less than a two-party system is a one-party system.
I agree, and I think that this the spirit of antagonism or being against so many things, it's something that I've been appreciating with Jordan Peterson recently. Is he wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life, and one of the underlying themes that runs throughout the whole book is this dichotomy between, or this duality between order and chaos. And when it comes to our advocacy for issues, if we spend our entire time speaking on things like, I'm against X, I'm against Y, I'm against Z, and you're trying to deconstruct the social order, then what you're inevitably going to do is sow seeds of chaos into the society. And I think that we're seeing some of those things. Mm-hmm. There have been this whole question of Russians interfering with the American election or whatever it might be. I mean, what they did is they didn't really particularly care if Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton was elected, mm-hmm. but what the Russian hackers or the Russian bots had tried to do was to sow disunity within the American populace, and I think they succeeded wildly with those things. People are more polarized in their mm-hmm. political beliefs than they ever have been before.
Absolutely.
You can actually see this on there's charts which show your consistency mm-hmm. of either being liberal or conservative, and also your view of people who are on the other side of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And you back even in the mid 90s, mm-hmm. There was a lot of consistency towards the center. Yeah. With people who are more willing to be mm-hmm. friends with people of different political persuasions and people who hold a diverse array of political opinions mm-hmm. that spread the field. But now, I mean, practically nobody is somebody who can reach across the aisle and speak coherently and respectively and charitably to somebody who disagrees with them, let alone understand their point of view or even agree with them on certain aspects. Mm-hmm. And I think that a part of it is because of this reactionary movement that the left has been fomenting over the last few years, which has bred nothing more than vitriol and anger. Yeah. And all anger does, and this is that's essentially what drives mm-hmm. These anti-establishment, anti-patriarchy, anti-racism mm-hmm. Movements. All it does is that it burns hot, it burns furiously, but it burns very quickly, and it easily burns out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be a big problem because once that anger reaches its terminus in terms of its efficacy of actually motivating people, then what's going to be left is a disordered and disunified society. And from there, it's going to be a much harder sell to try to rebuild some of the establishment or some of the institutions that we need in order to survive.
First of all, excellent use of the word terminus. That was just fantastic. Hey. Secondly, you talked about the destruction of the patriarchy or the destruction of order and this kind of stuff. Do you know the organization NOW? National Organization of Women?
Yes.
Okay. So, first and foremost, I would like to preface this with saying I'm very pro-woman. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Absolutely. But you're pro-woman. That's the distinction, is that you're pro-woman. I'll explain that later. Go on.
But the National Organization of Women is not something that is pro the feminine genius.
Which is exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
You looked at me so confused. I'm like, please don't tell me you understand what I'm saying here.
But this National Organization of Women is actually one of their goals is the destruction of institutional America. And there's this great article that was written by the sister of the foundress of NOW. And the sister who wrote this is not in support of NOW, But in the early days when they were meeting in apartments in New York City, she would sit in on her sister's meetings. And she wrote this wonderful article about the founding of Now. And she said that at the beginning of these meetings, they would gather around a table, and there'd be a chairperson who would open the meeting with a back and forth recitation like a litany, or of course, prayer in the Catholic Church, where you might invoke a saint, and then everybody else would say, "Pray for us," or "Have mercy on us" if it's Jesus or whatever else. And so you'd have this chairperson who would invoke a line, and then the other people around the table would respond. And so I want to read this chant that they begin every meeting with.
Sure.
Okay. Why are we here today? To make revolution. What kind of revolution? The cultural revolution. How do we make cultural revolution? By destroying the American family. How do we destroy the family? By destroying the American patriarch. And how do we destroy the American patriarch? By taking away his power. How do we take away his power? By destroying monogamy. How can we destroy monogamy? And their final answer is this: by promoting promiscuity, eroticism, prostitution, and homosexuality. So I brought that up. I mean, we're a little bit off track, but not entirely, because it's this kind of cultural revolution that ultimately leads to things like the Russian trolls being successful in sowing discord. If you have an ordered society, those attempts to cause discord by something external are not going to be effective unless there's first the internal discord happening. If we're not unified internally, we're not going to be able to stand strong together against things externally.
Right. It's a little different from a person who's actually virtuous insofar as that they're rightly ordered in their dispositions and their desires and their actions and their character and habits. That if an external temptation comes their way, then they're able to stand strong against the pull of that temptation.
Right. So, I mean, there's obviously this huge issue, and it leads back to the institutional corruption at the top of the FBI and the inability of our leaders to really speak clearly and coherently and concisely about really important matters. And whether that be, we talked very briefly last week about gun control, this week about, having integrity as a leader and actually standing by what it means to fight for what is good. Ari Fleischer, the former communications director for George W. Bush, in response to Democrats trying to hire Andrew McCabe in order for him to get his pension, he tweeted this out: "Wonderful idea. Every member of Congress should hire fired bureaucrats who lie to an inspector general in the course of a government investigation. Pensions before honesty. Great slogan." And I mean, that ultimately he's saying, we're in a crisis of leadership. You're putting pensions before honesty. You're putting your own self-entitlement before integrity. And we see that, and, like some of the things that Trump does or hate them, he is not generally considered a man of integrity. He's done a lot of great things for the pro-life movement, and he's done, I've already seen benefits from his tax plan and things like that. And that supposedly is only going to continue to get better. I'm looking forward to the child tax credit being doubled next year.
Same.
That'll be great. But he's not one that really stands behind his word. I mean, in the elections, he said, we're going to defend the Second Amendment and it's going to be great. And then, after the shooting in Florida, he came out and said, well, we need to take guns first and due process second. And sorry, that's not how the Constitution works.
Right.
We need due process for a reason. But ultimately, we're in this crisis of leadership, and if the crisis continues, we're going to see a continuing of the falling apart of the fabric of our society and our government. And it's something we really need to be aware of. And instead of shouting down party lines, Democrats and those who associate with Democrats should really stand up and say, you know what, we might not like that this guy was fired 2 days before his pension was going to be given, but if the FBI itself recommended to Jeff Sessions to fire the man, okay, we should be able to respect that.
Right. So the bureau, or the office that this man was heading up, or was very involved with for most of his life, recommends this. Yeah, I mean, they've got personal connections and everything. Yeah, sure. I mean, they're offering a genuine recommendation that is clearly against what would normally be their own biases.
Right.
And I think that there's an old Swedish proverb: "A fish rots from the head down," and there's some truth to that. But I think that there's also an aspect of our of the system of democracy itself, which lends to I think St. Augustine said that democracy is great until as long as you have virtuous citizens, but the second you have unvirtuous citizens, then what you have is you have unvirtuous princes. You have people who are elected from among the populace who are in many ways archetypal of exactly what they of what the people value. And so in my experience with people like Donald Trump and the kind of people I knew were very passionate about him when he was initially running as a candidate in 2016. They were the kind of people who more or less were just kind of tired of getting yelled at by leftists, and they were people who wanted somebody who could be kind of that bully to come back and fight back against the onslaught of the left, and many words that they use to insult us and demean people who are more politically conservative.
And the fact that Republicans were no better than the Democrats in terms of, fiscal responsibility, conservatism, all this stuff. Liberals were progressives and socialists, and Republicans were progressive lights and, just a hair right of the socialist spectrum.
Yeah, and I think part of the difficulty there, too, is that the Democrats a long time ago have kind of bought into the game of politics, so to speak. Not so much not focusing on the real issues that are supposed to be concerning those who are in leadership.
Right.
It reminds me of in Deuteronomy. At the end of Deuteronomy, Moses starts telling the people about, you guys are going to be asking for a king, but let me tell you about what a king's going to be like.
Right.
He's going to... if you have a king, if you have a leader, he's supposed to lead you in the law. He's supposed to be a religious example, a father to you, and to be somebody who helps you be a light to the nations, which is exactly what Israel's supposed to be.
Right, and to this point, Israel had no issues in terms of the constitution of their country.
Right.
They were fine. They had their laws for worship, and they knew who to go to in terms of disputes and, who's going to rule over disputes. They had really no issues, no major issues anyway, in these terms. And then they ask for a king for what reason?
Well, yeah, I mean, they asked for a king initially. They asked for a king finally in the book of at the beginning of Samuel. Yeah. Because they had just gone through this horrible line of leaders and all the judges who were just miserable failures, and they get worse as they go on. Yeah. I love people think of Gideon as this great hero, but he's kind of a half-hearted buffoon. He's always testing God. He's always saying, "Yeah, maybe got the angel here, but give me this other sign." The fleece and the wool. I don't even understand this at all. It's wet when the ground is dry. I don't know. I need to do research on that. I'm sure somebody's written something on it that actually has somewhat coherent, but I haven't seen anything to date on it. But Gideon failed in his leadership very, very quickly. He was a good military leader insofar as he was able to defeat the Midianites who had suppressed Israel. But the second he got power and became a judge and a leader, which again these judges were supposed to be those who judged according to the law and judged in their own lives and their own actions. But he fell into sexual promiscuity. He took the ephod, which is supposed to be the priestly garment, and made a golden one, and the people fell into worship of this ephod. So he brought the people into idolatry, and this is almost immediately after he had defeated the Midianites. And then what happens? Well, Israel goes back into this period of chaos and disarray, and then they cry out to God, and God rescues them again. But then guess what? that guy was just as bad, if not worse, than Gideon, and it continues to climb that way throughout all of Judges. And then eventually, what happens in Samuel is when they finally ask for a king, they ask for a king not like what Moses said he ought to be, but they say, "Let us be like the nations, and give us a king like him."
Right, they're jealous of their surrounding nations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they had this unified monarchy, the regality that came along with the royal line and the honor that is associated with that as well. And what they were hoping for is protection in terms of their borders, in terms of their financial state, in terms of their just physical security in general. And so what God gave them was Saul, and Saul was an excellent warrior. But what's interesting is that he is not a king. In the book of Joshua, the Hebrew that they use to describe him as a regula, I think it's regula, which is like leader. Whereas David later is called melech, which is king. So when so there's a distinction there. They ask for a king, what they're really looking for is like a political leader.
Right.
They're looking for the kind of priest king that David is supposed to be, which is why it's such a travesty when Saul sacrifices as he's waiting for Samuel before he goes on this battle, because he's usurping the position of God and acting as a spiritual leader when that's not his role. That's not what God has ordained him to do. Whereas David can later perform such action because he's a priest king. And anyway, so the whole point here is that I think what is problematic is that the role of a leader in any organization whatsoever, whether it be a family, a youth ministry, a church, a state, a nation, a business, is supposed to be the prime example of what the citizens ought to strive for. And because there is necessarily a certain amount of prestige and power and influence and financial gain to be had, the temptation to fall into playing politics and to sacrifice the good of true leadership is extremely powerful. And it takes a real man of virtue, a real man of genius, in order to maintain integrity throughout that. And that's exactly what went wrong with Saul. Is he didn't have that integrity. Many of his actions were done so that he would be glorified. So that he'd be able to be lifted up and shown as great in front of the people. Same thing with Samson. He whatever he saw, he wanted. And he would always look for more ways to trick other people and to kind of get his own way, when he could have been somebody who, and he did eventually free the Israelites from the Philistines, but in either case, I think that's a major flaw in our political system, is that it doesn't seem to me that there is as much focus or emphasis on political virtue and training for those who are entering into office, as Plato would actually recommend.
Right.
There's a difficulty with that too, obviously, of instituting those things. I mean, who would be the one to be the teacher for all the
well, especially in an elected representative democracy.
Yeah.
You know, because we're choosing our leaders. So what you would really need is actually the populace to be educated in what it means to be a leader. Good luck.
And to be virtuous too, which is practically impossible. And that was one of Aristotle's major criticisms, is that if you have a democracy, most people are going to be relatively uneducated, especially with respect to virtue. Whereas somebody who's in the aristocracy can be trained from birth to be a virtuous person.
And yet they're still stupid.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's a great assessment using biblical figures. And going back, I just wanted to read Attorney General Jeff Sessions' statement on the firing in comparison to Andrew McCabe's statement on the firing.
That's
have you read these two?
I have, yeah. I've heard it. Sorry, I haven't read it. But
okay.
I've heard it.
It's pretty interesting to look at the character of both individuals. So, first of all, Jeff Sessions. After an extensive and fair investigation, and according to Department of Justice procedure, the Department's Office of the Inspector General provided its report on allegations of misconduct by Andrew McCabe to the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. The FBI's OPR, that is the Office of Professional Responsibility, then reviewed the report and underlying documents and issued a disciplinary proposal recommending the dismissal of Mr. McCabe. Both the OIG and FBI OPR reports concluded that Mr. McCabe had made an unauthorized disclosure to the news media and lacked candor, including under oath on multiple occasions. The FBI expects every employee to adhere to the highest standards of honesty, integrity, and accountability. As the OPR proposal stated, all FBI employees know that lacking candor under oath results in dismissal and that our integrity is our brand. Pursuant to Department Order 1202, and based on the report of the Inspector General, the findings of the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, and the recommendation of the Department's senior career official, I have terminated the employment of Andrew McCabe effective immediately. I would say it's a pretty solid write-up.
It's clinical.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing personal. He's not maligning his character whatsoever. He's just stating the facts, and here are the issues that are at hand, and this is what he's accountable for.
Right. So, Andrew McCabe's statement, it's got a little bit slightly different tenor to it.
Nice.
Yeah. Starts off like this. I have been an FBI special agent for over 21 years. I spent half of that time investigating Russian organized crime as a street agent and supervisor in New York City. I spent the second half of my career focusing on national security issues and protecting this country from terrorism. I served in some of the most challenging, demanding, investigative, and leadership roles in the FBI, and I was privileged to serve as deputy director during a particularly tough time. For the last year and a half, my family and I have been the targets of an unrelenting assault on our reputation and my service to this country. Articles too numerous to count have leveled every sort of false, defamatory, and degrading allegation against us. The president's tweets have amplified and exacerbated it all. He called for my firing. He called for me to be stripped of my pension after more than 20 years of service. And all along we have said nothing, never wanting to distract from the mission of the FBI by addressing the lies told and repeated about us. No more. The investigation by the Justice Department's Office of Inspector General has to be understood in the context of the attacks on my credibility. The investigation flows from my attempt to explain the FBI's involvement in my supervision of investigations involving Hillary Clinton. I was being portrayed in the media over and over as a political partisan, accused of closing down investigations under political pressure. The FBI was portrayed as caving under that pressure and making decisions for political rather than law enforcement purposes. Nothing was further from the truth. In fact, this entire investigation stems from my efforts, fully authorized under FBI rules, to set the record straight on behalf of the Bureau and to make clear that we are continuing an investigation that people in DOJ opposed. The OIG investigation is focused on information I chose to share with the reporter through my public affairs officer and legal counselor. As deputy director, I was one of only a few people who had the authority to do that, and this just goes on and on and on.
Right.
It's really a woe is me. I find it interesting he pulls his family into it, almost like he can get more pity by doing this. That,
Sure.
you know, okay. But a couple things I want to point out here, that instead of being what he claims to be really is a solid leader, instead of doing that, he's really saying, woe is me, and this is so unfair and unjust and everything else. Whereas the true leader would say, well, if the FBI actually deems this to be the best thing for this FBI that I love and have devoted so much of my time and life to, then what's best for the FBI is what I want. Mm-hmm. That would be the leadership thing to do. Mm-hmm. If you really care so much about the security of our nation and the integrity of the FBI, and the FBI itself has deemed you to sully the reputation, then you should willingly step away. Mm-hmm. Not cry about it. I mean, it's pathetic. But one of the other interesting things here is, he says the president has called for his firing. Well, as the head of the executive branch and the FBI as the chief law enforcement part of the executive branch, he has that right.
And I hope he does it.
He has the right to do that.
Yes.
It's like saying, somebody that, a middle manager or something is called out by the CEO of a company, he's got the right to fire that middle manager. Mm-hmm. That's the right of the leader to do that. And I'm glad that it wasn't just Trump willy-nilly saying he needs to be fired, but that actually the investigation that the FBI itself did was very thorough.
Right.
And the third thing I would like to point out here was that he claimed that the FBI, it was claimed that the FBI caved to Hillary Clinton to shut down the investigation into her with her email servers and this kind of stuff. And he says, no, we didn't cave under political pressure. This was strictly for law enforcement purposes. Well, if that's the case, how come the director, if we rewind a couple years, said, yes, in any other circumstance, somebody who did this would be going to jail. Yes. This was criminal activity. However, we are not going to prosecute. How is that anything but political? How is that good law enforcement?
It's baffling to me. I mean, that's that's what that astounded me when I first heard it too, and I couldn't believe that it was actually openly admitted.
I know. It was shocking.
And I think you struck something here that it's very important when you said that the true leader, if you really cared about this community, the FBI, then he would have accepted the recommendation to step down, and maybe he would have even done it voluntarily, resigned. And if he would have done that, he would have, I think, walked out with more honor and prestige than he left with before, because he's a man of integrity to own up to his mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I think that right there is a sign of somebody who is really aware of leadership. One thing that I've...
Well, what is a man without his honor?
Nothing.
Right. I mean, that's something that I keep in mind regularly in my own life, is what is a man without his honor? Mm-hmm. What's a man if he's not worth his own word? Mm-hmm.
What's a man if he's not worth, if he doesn't have the self-confidence or the self-worth or the humility to recognize his own mistakes,
right?
Or his own weaknesses.
Right.
That's one thing that helped me, especially last year with my youth ministry and confirmation, is I readily admitted my mistakes to my youth ministry, the kids and the adults, whether it be something I didn't do right for the job, or if it's even like a personal struggle, like having ADHD or ever struggling through depression, just being open and honest about it.
Right.
I saw a tremendous transformation in the kids because I recognized, this is something that's embarrassing and difficult for me to talk about, but it's even more embarrassing and difficult for them to talk about. And it's a sign of true strength and true manhood for me to be able to show that this is something you ought to air, not to open up to others.
Right.
And it's the same thing with McCabe here, is that if he would have been honest about this, then he may have inspired others to do the same, and or at least maybe amended their ways so that they don't have to be accountable for those things later.
Right. And I'm not convinced that voters who are on the fence. I mean, Democrats are always going to vote Democrat. Republicans are always going to vote Republican. I don't think independents are going to look at this and say, you're right, we need to vote for these Democrats who offered to hire McCabe back so he could get his pension. I don't feel like that's something that's actually going to help the Democrats. But, and that's the other thing is for McCabe, even if you look at it from a strictly political point of view, and clearly the Democrats support him. Clearly there's some kind of relationship there between McCabe and the Democrats. Otherwise they wouldn't be so gung-ho about hiring him to give him his pension.
Right.
If McCabe actually cares about his Democratic allies, he would have stepped aside as well. Or he'd be out there rejecting these and saying, no, I'll go away without my pension. I might be back and running a campaign, or, do something like that. But he's really putting his allies in a tough position now, too, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, I think so, too. One thing that is that's being ignored by sociological researchers is the post-millennial generation, or the iGen.
Yeah.
Gen Z. I mean, there's a billion different names for it. They're still up and coming and is a sociological block or generational block. But what's interesting about that is that we haven't seen that they're more conservative than Generation X in their political worldview, for the most part. I mean, they are...
Well, Gen Xers weren't particularly conservative.
Right.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, Gen Xers, if you look at like the 80s and the 90s when they were kind of emerging as a voting group, it was a closer race, so to speak, in terms of the percentage who would vote Democrat versus Republican. Granted, younger people do tend to vote a little more liberal because they get a little more ideological and they're more heart thinking or they're more feelings.
Well, I remember coming
mindset.
across a phrase that was, if you don't vote liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you don't vote conservative when you're old, you have no brain.
I think that was Winston Churchill.
Was it?
I think he said something along those lines, yeah. But Generation Z, they're more concerned about fiscal responsibility. They're tired of this of race baiting. I can tell you, all my youth are like, I don't care that a person next to me is black, white, Latino, whatever.
Well, even millennials, I think, are generally sick of the race baiting crap too.
Yeah, I think that there is a stream of millennials.
I mean, if you look at like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, just these different social commentators that are becoming more and more popular and really engaging college students and young adults. You're going to get the social justice warrior kind. You're going to get those that are just there for the sound bites or to scream their position. But what you see if you watch videos of these debates and these social outreaches, that people are genuinely desiring to have a conversation. And if you approach it with respect, you respect the people of the other point of view, there's really great conversations that come about.
Right. I completely agree. And that's where I think that that's another line whatsoever. Basically, I was going to say that we need to have a more open, honest, or we need more training, more experience, and exposure. Our kids need more exposure to different points of view and how to actually dialogue.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely a lost art, and that itself is an issue with leadership too. Because if you look at you can talk about any issue: gun control, gay marriage, abortion, whatever it is. Leadership on both sides very frequently does nothing but malign and demean the other side, and that's then the same tact that people will take at the general level of the plebs.
Well, and so this is obvious. We're talking a lot about society and culture and everything, but I mean this happens in the church too. And you can point to maybe some bishops or some priests or whatever, and they're human too, but among lay people as well. And it's like every church I've worked at, I've dealt with the same issue. People don't like something I did. Do they come to me?
No.
Well, no, they go to the boss, right? They go to father.
Well, that's if you're lucky. I mean, my experience is they go to everybody else in the office or tell your parents about it or something like that.
So lack of leadership or you present a church doctrine and it's perfectly charitable or whatever, and there's all this discord then because how dare you teach this thing that the church actually teaches, and so you go down the line and then there's just all this discord and garbage and stuff because people aren't actually stepping up to be leaders. And then you carry that even further forward, and it's clear that people don't know their faith, and then nobody's stepping up to evangelize because they don't know their own faith to actually go out and do the dirty work of evangelization. Right. And the church is suffering because of this, because you have as high up as bishops, as well as priests, lay people, deacons, that don't know the fundamental cornerstone of the church inside and out, which is the liturgy. There's all this garbage out there about trying to make the liturgy something that it's not. Right. Trying to make it entertaining or trying to make it this or that or the other thing, when all we need to do is for leaders to step up and just help the church be herself. But that's a scary thing because the world hates the church.
Well, it's almost that self-esteem movement, but back in the days, just be yourself, be who you truly are. Except it's actually in this case, be who you truly are. Right. So often that people in the church are trying to put on a mask of who we really are, and that's and I've said this over and over again. The more I present St. Thomas, John Paul II, St. Augustine, Aristotle. Granted, the last one's not a saint, but regardless, these kinds of thinkers who will who have a meaty, have a real substantial, meaty substance to them, something to chew on. I can attest to dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of kids who've been largely disengaged, but then once it's presented in a way that's conversational, honest, genuine, and relatable, they're all eating it up. I gave an hour-long lecture on natural law last week, and the kids were just devouring it.
And I can attest to this too. I've been doing youth ministry even longer than you have. Maybe not now because I'm in a slightly different role, but I've been working in the church for even longer than you have.
Absolutely.
I remember teaching 7th and 8th graders Vatican II, and they all wrote papers on the universal call to holiness. And I had parents calling the principal upset about this. It's like, really? You're upset that your kid understands Vatican II? Right. I think what's really going on is that you're upset that your kid knows more about Vatican II than you do.
Right. Well, there was an issue, too. I mean, where is it? This is... I don't know if I have a copy here, but there's a book called Truth Be Told by Jason Everett and by Joe Candy and Mark...
Mark Hart?
Yeah, Mark Hart.
Yep.
The book's 9th, 8th grade reading level.
Yeah.
And I was expecting my kids last year to have everyone to read this book and write me 100-word summary or question of the book. Okay. Yep. I remember getting a call from a father about halfway through, who was really upset about this, and he said something along the lines of, you've got all your advanced degrees in theology and philosophy and whatnot, but maybe this stuff is just too much for my 9th grade boy's brain to handle. And I'm like, the kid's in physics. Right. If he can do physics, he can do basic apologetics. Yeah. I mean, this is something you can teach to 6th graders. In fact, I do, and they eat it up. The issue was that the dad, what was going on here was the boy hadn't done any of the projects for confirmation. He'd been disconnected. He wasn't involved in small groups. He completely bombed the final test, which was just simply give me a 30-second to 1 minute answer to this question. And there was like 5 questions on it. I gave them 2 months to prep for it. I gave them all the information that they needed, and even wrote outlines for them. Yeah. But his dad wasn't willing to step up in leadership to have his son even memorize these words. Whether or not he understood it's one thing. Anybody can memorize something. Yeah. How quickly Michael memorizes a book. Michael's 2.5 years old, and there's a book that's maybe like 200-300 words, and I can read it to him 3 times. He's got the whole thing down. There's this book, Dora the Explorer. It's an overnight she's having with her best friend Boots, and he's got the whole thing down. He literally reads it himself. Right. When I ask him to. Yeah. So this 9th grade boy certainly could have, but regardless, the father was recognizing the lack of his own formation and understanding that I'm an adult and this stuff is brand new to me. I mean, how new is it to my 9th grade son who I've never been involved with his faith life before? Well, the problem is your formation stopped in 2nd grade. Your son's probably more advanced in the faith than you are.
So, if I might summarize, because we only have a couple minutes left, I think perhaps we stumbled upon a very important truth, Studi.
Ooh, a truth.
And perhaps,
stumbly truth.
Perhaps we've inadvertently already planned out our radio show for next week. What I think we stumbled upon is that the reason why there's such a lack of leadership is that there's a lack and a crisis of fatherhood.
Yes. Absolutely the case. Absolutely the case. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I hardly know a person who says that they have a good relationship with their father. Or at least their whole life, and it's one that's been a mentoring relationship. Yeah. In the faith,
So maybe, we like to just shotgun things here on the Lost Voice radio program. Maybe next week we talk about the crisis of fatherhood in our culture. I don't know.
I think it's a good transition.
Yeah, I think it's a
guns, leadership, fatherhood. It's a good man.
And the week after we'll be on Scotch and cigars.
Yes. Hey, G.K. Chesterton's philosophy of alcohol and cigars. He's got things on it. He's written poems and whatnot.
Does he?
Oh, yes.
I much prefer St. John Chrysostom.
Punching people in the mouth, Jake?
Yes. Who deny the good of a glass of wine.
The good spirit that the Lord has granted us.
Yes.
The miracle of turning water into wine, which in a very roundabout way he does every single time wine happens, but that's a big, long story. But anyway, for the Lost Voice, This is, of course, your good friend Jonathan Studi, along with your other good friend Jacob Nelson, signing off. We will see you guys next week as we continue to seek after that voice of wisdom, the wisdom of a good father.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.